After 6 months of living a normal life, I stood in front of my son's villa with a cane, a suitcase, and nowhere to go. My son heard me out in silence while I laid out what had happened. Then he met my eyes and told me, "Dad, you can't stay here." 60 minutes later, I was riding a late-night bus into a raging snowstorm, bound for my daughter's farm. I believed I was heading there to reconnect with what remained of my family, but the moment she swung open that door and her gaze landed on me, her opening words planted a suspicion that somebody had been deceiving us both for a very long time. Welcome back to His Hidden Revenge. I'm glad you're here for this one. If you're new, tap subscribe so this channel can find you again when the next story drops. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments, are you listening in the morning with your coffee catching this in the afternoon? Or is it late night and the house has finally gone quiet? I always find the quiet hours suit these kinds of stories best. One quick note, certain details in this account have been shaped for storytelling and to protect the people involved. Any resemblance to specific individuals is coincidental. What I hope you carry with you is the truth underneath the story. I've disembarked in combat zones with less gear and more danger than this, but Richmond Main Street Station on a December night, $60 in my pocket. A military at a 6 months expired had a particular kind of weight to it. The Greyhound sighed to a halt at the curb. I got my grip on the cane shrapnel near my spine, had been running the show on my right leg for years now, and slung my single duffel across my shoulder. 60 years old, Army combat medic retired, 6 months a civilian, and still cataloging assets like the mission hadn't ended. The tally: $60 the cane, a cell phone so cracked it was decorative, the duffel holding 2 sets of clothes, and one address committed to memory, never confirmed by phone. McLean, Virginia, my son's house. Reed and I hadn't been in the same room in 5 years. For 5 years, I'd routed every dollar I could spare from deployment pay straight into the family account. For 5 years, I'd told myself that wire transfers and stiff corporate-sounding emails were a kind of bridge. He'd said he was building a pharmaceutical company, said it needed funding to stay alive. I took him at his word. The bus to McLean ran every hour. I bought the ticket with a $12 bill, then parked myself on a bench under fluorescent tubes that hummed and flickered like something wounded. The terminal moved around me, couples threading fingers together, men in suits thumbing their phones. A woman with a sleeping infant strapped across her chest. None of that was mine. The address was my entire plan. In Fallujah, I'd learned that plans answer to the field, not the other way around, and that lesson hadn't let me down. The bus reeked of diesel fumes and rain-soaked wool. 40 minutes out, the driver announced my corner. I stepped down onto pavement glazed with new snow. This was the kind of neighborhood where silence is a feature someone paid for: broad lawns, mortared stone walls, driveways that swept away into the dark. 3 blocks cane-tapping house numbers checked against what I'd memorized. Then I found it. The McLean mansion pushed warm amber light from its second-floor windows out into the cold. 4 stone steps led to a front door, framed by frosted glass panels, and through one, I could make out a crystal chandelier, suspended in the foyer like a waterfall that had frozen mid-fall. I stopped at the bottom of the steps. 5 years of a combat medic's wages, and the question was simple. Where did it all go? Chandelier and marble, apparently. I went up slow, each tap of the cane deliberate. The second step caught my right leg shrapnel on bone, but I held and made it to the top. Iron door knocker. I used it twice. Movement inside. The door came open. A woman filled the frame, 30 years old, blonde hair drawn back in a tight ponytail. A silk blouse that probably cost more than everything in my duffel. Her gaze traveled the length of me, snagged on the cane, settled briefly on the bag, and her face gave nothing back. "Peter," I said. I had her face from exactly 2 photographs Reed had forwarded years ago. Petra Langley, his wife, no smile, no motion to one side. "Reed," she said over her shoulder, voice stripped of everything. Then she turned and disappeared back into the house. I stayed in the open doorway while snow gathered on my coat. Moments later, Reed materialized. 32 years old, silk shirt, charcoal gray collar, open every hair and position. The grooming of a man who either has money or is performing it convincingly. My son, Reed Calhoun. He pulled up 3 feet short of the door. For just a beat, I thought I read something in his face, maybe recognition, maybe something closer to relief. Then the hand came out. A handshake. "Dad," he said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I sent an email," I told him. "Phone's been dead since Roanoke." He gave a slow nod, his eyes drifting past me toward the street. You should have called ahead. I just did, I said. By showing up. We held that distance. Heat leaked past him from inside, dissolving into the night between us. He didn't move back. Listen, Reed said, his voice going rehearsed and careful. The money was lost in the pharma sector recession, Dad. The company folded last year. I'm rebuilding, but it's tight right now. My eyes went past his shoulder, crystal chandelier, marble underfoot, a staircase rising with a mahogany banister sweeping up to the second floor. Tight, I said back. Yeah. He moved his weight from one foot to the other. And Dad, you can't stay here. The company's image depends heavily on the stability of our living space. We're hosting investors next week. It's complicated. A cold thing settled somewhere behind my sternum. Not fury, not even shock. The dull clinical acknowledgement you reach when the bleeding stops and you understand the damage was done before you arrived. This man is not my son. My son doesn't live here anymore. Then point me somewhere, I said. Reed's jaw went tight. He cut a glance toward the hallway toward Petra, who was leaning against the wall, inspecting her nails with the vacant patience of someone who'd clocked this scene before. Dad, Reed said, voice low. You look like a vagrant. This isn't a recovery ward for the sick. Clean delivery, no wasted motion. One nod from me, that was all. I can wire you some money, he said, pivoting fast. Not much, but enough for a motel. Give me your account number. No, I said. I keep it. He frowned at that. Dad, I said keep it. I was already turning, cane on marble, then cane on pavement. The door behind me clicked shut. No drama, no force. Just closed. Quiet, efficient. Snow was thickening, heavy flakes pressing into my collar. Standing on the sidewalk, I ran the numbers. Not weakness protocol. When the grid fails, a combat medic reassesses the terrain. $60, no phone, no roof. December, cold, working into the marrow. One place remained that had ever felt like footing I could trust. The overnight coach toward North Carolina was sparsely loaded. I paid $22 at Richmond Main Street Station and boarded the 11:45 Greyhound to Boone. Right side window seat, old reflex, keep both flanks in view. Another inventory, the kind the body runs without being asked, $23. Remaining military ID, no phone, one duffel, and an address burned into memory from a postcard Willa mailed 4 years back. Copper Ridge, Herb Farm, Highway 421, outside Boone. My daughter. 5 years since I'd seen her face. 5 years of dialing the number Reed had given me every week, no exceptions. Sunday mornings, 700 Cobble. Time standing in the comms tent, waiting. The line rarely got through. When it did, it broke apart, static fragments, dead air. 2 years ago, a satellite relay had connected, and I heard her on the other end, weeping. Dad, you haven't called in a month. I called last Sunday, I told her, and the Sunday before. The line never goes through. A stretch of silence then. I don't understand. I didn't either. The call collapsed before I could push further. Not long after the number went dead. Disconnected, no forwarding. I wrote Reed and asked for a new one. His reply, Willa's going through a lot right now, Dad. Give her space. I'll keep you updated. So I kept wiring money into the family account, and I trusted my son to move it where it needed to go. Now the dark North Carolina ridgelines were sliding past the glass, and there was a question I'd been refusing that I couldn't refuse anymore. How does a man lose his daughter when he rang her line every week without fail for 2 years? The bus labored up the North Carolina grades engine, working hard. Towns swept by dark storefronts, nobody out, everything shut tight after 9. My breath fogged the window. The cold outside was a different species, thinner with an edge. At 2:15 in the morning, the driver announced my stop. I stepped off onto frozen gravel at 18 degrees Fahrenheit. The bus rolled on taillights, shrinking down Highway 421 until they were gone, and I was the only thing standing under a sky clear enough that the stars looked like shrapnel scattered across black. No lights from the road, just a weathered wooden sign 50 feet ahead. Copper Ridge Herb Farm. I started up the gravel path, the cane punching through the snow crust with each step. My right leg registered every inch the shrapnel doing what shrapnel does. I kept going. The farmhouse emerged from the dark 2 stories, white clapboard, a steep roof buckled under its load of snow, and a porch light still on. That yellow wedge across the snow meant someone was awake at this hour. I took the porch steps one at a time, moving soft. I had no interest in frightening a young woman alone at 2:30 in the morning. 3 quiet knocks. Sound of feet quick across the floor inside, every light coming on kitchen hall porch. The door pulled back. Willa stood there, 28 years old, dark hair, loosely braided flannel pajamas, wool socks on her feet. Her face was Iris's face. She looked at me without moving. 3 full seconds of silence, so complete it had weight. Then her arms came around me, not hello, not welcome, something more, like proof. Dad, she breathed against my shoulder. You're alive. I held on to her. The cane hit the porch boards. I'm alive, I said. She drew back, eyes raw, reading my face the way a medic reads a patient. Come inside. It's freezing. Inside, the air held warmth. A wood stove in the corner pushed heat into the room. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, rosemary, chamomile, something sharper I didn't recognize. The kitchen table was old pine, scarred and solid. She pulled a chair out and I lowered myself into it. Tea appeared in front of me without a word asked. She settled across the table and held her gaze steady on me. Some silences carry more force than any explosion. This was the kind between 2 people confirming the other one is still real. I didn't know if you were coming back, she said at last. Her voice broke on it. Reed said you had. He said you'd moved on, that you didn't want contact. I set the mug down without a sound. I called you every week for 2 years, she blinked. What? Every Sunday morning, 700 cobble time, the number Reed gave me. It almost never went through. Her face drained of color. Dad, I never got a single call. We held each other's eyes across the table. What number were you dialing? She asked. I gave it to her from memory. She shook her head slowly. That's not my number. That has never been my number. The cold I thought I'd left outside pressed deeper into my chest. Reed gave it to me, I said. 3 years ago. Told me it was yours. Willa's hands tightened around her mug. He told me you stopped writing after Mom died, that you were processing things, that you needed room. I wrote you every month, I said. 4 years straight. Did any of it reach you? No. Another silence, this one, with sharper edges. Where were you sending them? She asked. The family P.O. box in McLean. Reed said he'd pass them along. Her jaw set hard. She turned toward the wood stove, and in that firelight I saw her mother's exact profile. Dad, she said quietly, Reed told me you signed papers after Mom's funeral, legal documents, cutting ties with both of us. He said you wanted a clean break. My pulse slowed the way it does when you realize a wound runs deeper than the surface shows. I never signed any papers, I said. She looked back at me. What? I never signed anything, I said again. Not after the funeral, not ever. Her eyes went wide. But Reed showed me. What exactly did he show you? Documents with your signature on them, legal language about severing parental contact and transferring estate authority. Willa, I said, leaning forward. I never put my name to anything like that. I don't know what those papers were. She pushed back from the chair and crossed to the window, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her breath came in shallow, shaking pulls. Then where have you been? She whispered. Deployed, I said. Iraq, Afghanistan, sending every dollar I earned into the family account so Reed could build his company and you could keep the farm going. She turned. What family account? The joint account your mother set up. Reed said he was managing it, getting you what you needed. Her face moved from pale to something closer to gray. Dad, she said slowly, I haven't seen a dollar from any family account in 5 years. We sat at that kitchen table until 4 o'clock in the morning. Every question I asked opened onto a larger one beyond it. The phone number that was never hers, the letters that never got through the papers, I never signed the money she never touched. I began to understand that what I'd walked into wasn't some routine family misunderstanding. It was architecture, something deliberate and load-bearing, and my son had assembled it piece by piece. The next morning, Willa didn't waste time on pleasantries. She placed the green iron box on the table and sat down, fingers laced tight in front of her. I knew the box without being told. Olive drab military surplus, the kind designed to keep documents dry in the field. Iris used to keep seed catalogs in one, just like it. Willa slid it across the pine table toward me. Open it, she said. I raised the lid. The hinges moved without a sound, well maintained. Inside lay envelopes white standard postal, roughly 24 of them, bound with twine. I drew them out carefully and spread them across the table. Everyone had been opened. Everyone carried a red stamp across the face. Return to sender addressee, declined contact. I picked up the one on top. The return address read, Willa Calhoun, Copper Ridge, Herb Farm, Highway 421, Boone, North Carolina. The destination was mine. Fleet Post Office APOAE 0932. Oh, my last deployment address in Afghanistan. I checked the postmark. March 2018. Then I looked again at the red stamp, not printed, handwritten block capitals in red ink. I knew that hand. I sent you 23 letters over 5 years, Dad, Willa said. Her voice was flat and controlled the register you adopt when the only alternative is screaming. Every single one came back with his handwriting on the stamp. I set the envelope down with care. My hands wanted to shake. I didn't let them. Read, I said. She nodded. I knew his printing from how he marked the address corrections. He wrote like that back in high school, perfect block capitals whenever he wanted something to look official. I picked up another envelope. Same red stamp, same hand. I worked through the stack. 23 letters, all returned, all marked declined. Not one had ever reached me. What did you write about? I asked. Her jaw tightened. Everything. Mom's death. The farm. How much I missed you. How frightened I was trying to keep the herb business going on my own. I asked you to come home. I asked if you were all right. I told you I loved you. She stopped, swallowed. And everyone came back 3 weeks later with that stamp on it, like you'd read it and decided you were done with me. I unfolded the first letter. The paper was thin, the weight you choose for overseas mail to keep postage down. Willa's handwriting neat, tilting slightly left. I read the opening line. Dad, I don't know if you'll get this, but I have to try. I couldn't go further. Not yet. A father's letters aren't just paper. They're ropes thrown across the dark of a war zone, proof that someone is waiting on the other side, and Reed had severed every last one. Did you try calling? I asked. Willa pulled out her phone, older model, cracked screen. She scrolled and turned it to face me. The contact read Dad. Under it a number I didn't recognize. What number is that? I asked. The one Reed gave me after Mom's funeral, she said. He told me you'd changed yours, that you wanted a fresh start, that this was the only way to reach you. She tapped the screen. The phone dialed. 2 rings, then a voice I recognized. Hey, Willa, what's up? Reed's voice. She ended the call and set the phone down on the table. I've been calling that number for 2 years, she said quietly. Every time I wanted to talk to my dad, I got my brother instead. I stared at the phone. He told me you were busy, she went on, that you were working through Mom's death, that you'd call when you were ready. You never did. I reached into my duffel for my own phone, the shattered one. I didn't need to look at the screen. I recited the number from memory. Willa shook her head. That's not the one he gave me. That number has been mine for 8 years, I said. She closed her eyes. He said you didn't want to be disturbed. Willa. I said working through it piece by piece. He told me you were focused on the farm, that you were grieving, that you needed space. He said he checked on me when he could. He never once checked on me, she said. We went quiet. I looked back down at the letters, 23 of them, 5 years worth. I'd sent letters of my own, dozens of them mailed to the family P.O. box in McLean, with instructions for Reed to pass them on to Willa. She hadn't received those either. You don't need walls to separate a father and daughter 8,000 miles apart. You just need to own the wires. He kept us from each other, I said quietly. 5 years? Willa nodded. Her hands were trembling now. Why? She whispered. Why would he do that? I had no answer yet, but the shape of it was coming into focus. The mansion in McLean, the money he claimed the market had swallowed, the cold dismissal at the door. Reed hadn't only taken money, he'd taken time, closeness, the chance for a father and daughter to reach each other when it mattered most. He'd constructed a cage around both of us, built from intercepted letters, counterfeit phone numbers, and lies delivered with flawless corporate precision. And neither of us had ever known we were inside it. I sat without moving. My grip on those letters was tight enough to crease the paper, and I didn't ease it. It was the only way to hold steady. He ran both ends, I said. Your letters to me, my letters to you, the phone numbers, the excuses. We were speaking to him the whole time, believing we were reaching each other. Willa rose sharply, pulling open a deep drawer beneath the counter. She drew out a stack of printed documents and laid them flat in front of me. Then she turned away to face the window, as though she couldn't watch my face while I read. I looked down at what Willa had set before me. Bank statements, the joint account Iris had established for both siblings before she passed. The first page was dated January 2016. I knew the account number on sight. I'd wired money into it every month for 5 years without exception. Deployment bonuses, hazard pay, combat, zone, differentials, everything I earned beyond base salary, fed straight into that account. With one standing instruction: keep the farm running, take care of Willa. I worked through the statements page by page. Month after month, deposits came in. My name on every wire transfer receipt, amounts ranging between $3,000 and $7,000 depending on the deployment cycle. 5 years of deposits. Then I reached the withdrawals. Every cent methodically emptied month after month. Large transfers, $20,000, $30,000, $15,000. The name on the withdrawals, Reed Calhoun. I tallied the total twice to be certain I wasn't misreading. $240,000. Gone. Every dollar you sent home for 5 years, Dad, Willa said quietly from the window. She still hadn't turned around. Gone. I moved to the authorization forms attached to the statements. Monthly approvals required dual signatures. Both Reed and Willa had to sign off on any withdrawal over $5,000. That was the safeguard Iris had built into the trust. I examined Willa's signature on the first form, then the second, then the third. Not one of them matched. He forged my signature on the authorization forms, Willa said. Her voice was stripped of everything. I never knew. I never even had access to the account statements until 2 months ago when I finally demanded them from the bank. I counted the forms, 47 of them. 47 months of systematically forging his sister's name to drain a trust fund while she lived in near poverty on a farm that should have been flourishing. The final statement was dated November the 2021 month back. Final balance $0. Let me repeat that figure so the arithmetic of it lands. $240,000, 5 years. Every deployment bonus, every hazard differential, every dollar I earned, holding broken men together in dirt trenches while mortars rattled the walls. Gone. And Willa had been told the entire time that I'd instructed them to leave it untouched, that I was saving it for when I came home. What did he tell you when you asked about the account? I said. Willa finally turned from the window. Her eyes were red. He said you'd ordered us not to touch it, that you were building something after you got home, that I should focus on the farm and not worry about money. The farm was never in serious trouble, I said slowly. Was it? She shook her head. Hasn't been in years. We're small but stable. Herb sales cover operating costs. Not wealthy but not underwater. Then why were you living like you were? She looked away. Because Reed told me the account was locked untouchable, Mom's orders, and I believed him. I set the statements down with care. My hands stayed steady. Good. Steady hands mean you can still function. Show me the farm, I said. We walked the property. December cold cut through my jacket, but I barely registered it. I was running field assessments the way I'd been trained: infrastructure, resources, vulnerabilities. The greenhouses were in working order, 3 of them each around 30 feet long, plastic sheeting reinforced with duct tape and wooden bracing. Willa's handiwork, done alone every winter for 5 years. The cold storage building was finished, door hanging off a single hinge interior, dark. How long has that been out of commission? I asked. 2 years, Willa said. No money for repairs. I've been running everything through the root cellar instead. We moved past the processing shed. Inside, I could see Iris's old copper distillation rig resting on a wooden bench, gleaming, polished, maintained like something sacred. You kept all of this going, I said quietly. Alone for 5 years, Willa nodded. Mom's distillation equipment, I cleaned it every week just the way she showed me, even during stretches when I had nothing to run through it. Some mothers leave recipes or photo albums. Iris left a living defense system. She just needed someone who understood medicine to finish reading her notes. Willa brought me to the main greenhouse, the largest of the 3. She pushed the door open, and warm, humid air rolled out to meet us. The smell reached me immediately, earth-green growth, and underneath it, something sharper. Medicinal. She led me to the far corner. A protected section screened from the main growing beds by a low wooden partition. Dense rows of silvery green plants, narrow leaves, woody stems, white flowers beginning to open, despite the winter cold outside. I recognized them at once. Salvia apiana, I said. Willa looked at me surprised. You know it, white sage, I said. I came across it in military medical journals, neural tissue studies, anti-inflammatory properties. They were running trials on extracts for nerve pain mitigation in battlefield trauma cases. I knelt down, ignoring the complaint from my bad leg, and pressed my palm against the oldest stalk. The stem was thick, nearly woody. The roots visible through the soil went deep. Mom planted this before I was even born, Willa said. She always said it was the only strain that refused to die in this particular North Carolina soil. Something about the clay composition. I studied the soil. Red unusual for this region. I lifted a handful and worked it between my fingers, iron-rich acidic, a mineral profile unlike anything standard. She kept detailed notes, Willa went on. Growth rates, extraction yields, chemical composition testing. I never understood why. It was just Mom's project. I rose slowly, brushing the red clay from my hands. Something clicked into alignment. Battlefield medical journals. Neural research. White sage extracts showing real results in trials targeting PTSD, chronic pain, cognitive restoration in trauma patients. Iris wasn't a hobbyist. She was a researcher. And this greenhouse wasn't a farm. It was a laboratory. Your mother knew something, I said quietly, and I'm beginning to think Reed knew it too. Willa's eyes sharpened. What do you mean? I pressed my palm against the oldest stalk of sage again. Its roots drove down into a distinctive vein of red North Carolina clay that existed nowhere else in the county. This isn't about land, I said. It's about what's growing in it. I looked at Willa. There's someone I need to see before we take another step. Someone who watched your mother work this soil for 30 years. Someone who might understand what she was actually building here. We set out along the narrow frozen trail toward the neighboring property. 500 yards through snow and bare trees. My cane punched into the ground with every step, but I held pace. The cold had teeth, but I'd worked in worse. The house was smaller than Copper Ridge, single-story, white paint lifting at the edges, but the porch had been swept clean and smoke climbed from the chimney. Willa knocked twice. The door opened right away. A woman stood in the frame, 71 years old. Gray hair drawn back in a bun, wearing a wool cardigan, and an expression that said she'd been expecting exactly this. Garrett, she said quietly. Not a question. A confirmation. O'Dallas Kettner, Willa said. Mom's closest friend for 30 years. O'Dallas stepped aside. Come in before you freeze. The kitchen carried the smell of fresh bread and black coffee. She filled 2 mugs without asking and placed a plate of bread on the table. We sat. O'Dallas studied my face for a long moment. Then she said, Iris told me that if you ever made it back, I should give you something. But first you need to hear what's been going on here. I waited. Reed came down 3 separate times over the last 5 years, O'Dallas said, each time trying to get Willa to sign a proxy for General Property Management Authority. Just a formality, he kept calling it. I refused all 3 times, Willa said. Something felt wrong. O'Dallas nodded. That proxy would have handed Reed legal authority to act on your behalf across everything connected to the farm, sales leases, development deals. You'd have signed away your right to say no. The cold settled deeper in my chest. Did Iris know? I asked. O'Dallas's expression softened. Iris knew exactly what her son was. In the last 14 months of her illness, she went to see a lawyer on her own, told no one except me. She said she needed to lock down the farm before she ran out of time. O'Dallas reached into a drawer and produced a yellowed business card. Your wife told me, she said, this land will never be sold. I've anchored it. She slid the card across the table. Fern Alcott Estate Attorney, Boone, North Carolina. A phone number in faded ink. Iris asked me to hold on to this, O'Dallas said. She told me if Garrett ever makes it back, give it to him. I picked the card up carefully. The edges were worn the way something gets when it's been carried close for years. Some mothers protect their children while they're still alive. Ian and Iris built a fortress to protect hers from the grave. Did she say what she'd done? I asked. O'Dallas shook her head. Just that the farm was protected, that no matter what Reed tried, he couldn't touch it. She made me promise not to tell Willa until you came home. Willa's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Why didn't she tell me herself? Because you would have asked questions, Odalis said quietly, and Reed would have noticed. Your mother was keeping you in the dark to keep you safe. I sat back. A memory came up sharp and clear. 6 months before Iris passed, she'd sent me an email. Subject line: Need your signature estate documents. A scanned link attached, digital signature required. I'd signed it without reading a word. I was in Mosul managing a mass casualty event, 12 wounded in a single hour. I'd opened it during a 3-minute break, clicked the link signed, where the arrow pointed, and returned to saving lives. I never read what those documents said. I signed something, I said aloud. 6 months before she died, Iris sent me paperwork by email. I put my name to it without reading it. Willa looked at me. What was it? I don't know, I said. I was in the middle of a casualty wave. I trusted her. Odalis allowed herself a faint smile. That's exactly what she was counting on. Iris knew you'd sign whatever she sent because your trust in her was absolute. Whatever she had you put your name to, that was part of how she anchored it. We walked back to Copper Ridge in silence. By the time we reached the farmhouse, the sun was going down 7 o'clock. I needed information from someone who understood the anatomy of financial crime. I borrowed Willa's phone and dialed a number I'd held in memory for 20 years. 3 rings. Osterfeld. The voice was unchanged, rough, direct. Dwight Osterfeld. 62 years old, forensic accountant based in D.C. We'd come through Fallujah together in 2003. Dwight, it's Garrett Calhoun. Silence. Then, I'll be damned. Where are you? North Carolina, I need your expertise. Talk. I gave him the summary 10 minutes, no interruptions. I could hear his keyboard working in the background. When I finished, there was a pause. Then Dwight said, Give me the account number. I read it off the statement. More keystrokes. 3 minutes of quiet. Garrett, Dwight said slowly, This account tripped a red flag 18 months ago. Automated Army finance system anomalous withdrawal pattern on a deployed service member joint account. The system doesn't ask permission. It watches. I tightened my grip on the phone. What does that mean? It means normally this triggers a CID review within 60 days, Criminal Investigation Command, federal jurisdiction. But someone filed extension paperwork to delay the audit. He paused. The name on that filing is Reed Alexander Calhoun. My pulse steadied, combat calm. He knew, I said. He's known for 18 months, Dwight confirmed. He's been playing defensive chess, buying himself time, most likely working to cover his tracks before the audit runs its course. How much runway does he have left? Extensions cap at 24 months, Dwight said. He's got 6 months, maybe less. After that, CID moves whether he's ready or not. He let that sit for a beat. You need to understand how military financial crime investigations operate. The moment a deployed service member's account shows anomalous drains, the system doesn't ask permission. It watches. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. What do I do? I asked. Get legal help tonight, Dwight said. And don't let that boy know you're on the ground. If he figures out you're back and asking questions, he'll accelerate whatever he's been building toward. I hung up and stared at Fern Alcott's yellowed card. 8 o'clock at night. I dialed anyway. If she didn't pick up, I'd call again at 8 o'clock in the morning and sit outside her office until the lock turned. A woman's voice answered on the 3rd ring. Fern Alcott. I kept the summary as tight as a military briefing. Iris Calhoun's widower estate questions, urgent. 5 seconds of quiet. Then, tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Don't come alone. Bring your daughter. Fern Alcott's office sat inside a red brick building on Boone Main Street, the kind of structure built to outlast winters, not to impress visitors. We arrived at 9 o'clock sharp. Willa and I climbed the narrow staircase to the 2nd floor. The door had a frosted glass panel with her name stenciled in black. Fern Alcott, estate attorney. I knocked once. Come in. The office was compact but ordered. Heavy legal volumes lined every wall. A desk sat under a window, looking out over Main Street, and behind it sat a woman, 55 years old, short gray hair, reading glasses on her nose. She rose when we came in. Garrett Calhoun, she said, not a question. Yes, ma'am. Fern Alcott, firm handshake. And you must be Willa, Willa took her hand without a word. Fern gestured to the two chairs across from her desk. We sat. She drew a thick manila folder from the filing cabinet and placed it on the desk between us. The tab read, Calhoun Iris Estate. I worked with your wife for 14 months before she passed, Fern said, opening the file. She was very specific about what she wanted, and she made me promise not to reach out to either of you until Garrett came home. She looked at me directly. She knew you'd come back, Fern said. She just didn't know when. I gave one nod. I didn't trust my voice yet. Fern drew out the first document-heavy, paper official seal at the bottom. Your wife placed this land under permanent preservation lock with the North Carolina Land Trust, she said. It's called a conservation easement. Do you know what that means? No, I said. It means the land cannot be sold, subdivided, or transferred for development. Ever. The easement is binding on all future owners in perpetuity. Copper Ridge Herb Farm will remain agricultural land for as long as the soil exists. She pushed the document toward me. I scanned it dense legal language, but the essential phrases stood out clearly. Permanent restriction, no commercial development, no subdivision, no transfer of development rights. Iris had signed it 6 months before she died, the same window when she'd emailed me asking for my signature. Who holds the easement? I asked. North Carolina Land Trust, Fern said. A non-profit conservation organization. They monitor compliance. If anyone tries to breach the terms, they have full legal authority to enforce through the courts. Willa leaned forward. What does this mean for ownership? Fern produced another document, the will. Garrett is the primary beneficiary. Willa, your named co-trustee with full operational authority. The farm passes to you jointly. She paused. Reed was left $5,000 for closure. He holds zero rights to the land itself. Something cold and precise settled in my chest. Not quite relief. Something closer to recognition. Some people write wills to divide what they built. Iris had written one that made division legally impossible. She hadn't trusted her son with a single acre. Reed has known all of this for 3 years, Fern continued. Since probate court issued formal notification, he received copies of the easement, the will, and the trust documents. Willa's voice went quiet. Then why is he still pushing the legal pressure, trying to get me to sign that proxy? Why? Fern looked at me. That is an excellent question. I leaned back. The pieces were in front of me. I just needed to align them. Because there's something Iris left outside the equation, I said slowly. Fern nodded. Correct. What? Willa asked. Fern tapped the conservation easement. This protects the land, the physical soil, the buildings, the infrastructure, but it doesn't protect what you produce from that land. The answer arrived before she finished the sentence. Intellectual property, I said. Fern's eyes sharpened. Exactly. Commercial licensing rights from any medical products researched and formulated using herbs grown here. The easement doesn't reach that. The land can't be sold, but the medicine can be taken. Willa looked between us. What does that actually mean? I turned to her. It means Reed can't take the farm. But if he gets possession of Iris's research, her formulas, her extraction methods, her chemical compositions records, he can file a patent in his own name. He can claim he developed it. Once a patent issues, he owns the commercial rights to manufacture and sell it. Even though Mom did every bit of the work, Willa asked. Especially because your mother did all the work, Fern said. Patent law doesn't concern itself with who ran the experiments in a backroom lab. It cares about who files first. If Reed submits a patent application for white sage extract formulations before you do, and the USPTO grants it, he controls the licensing. You'd be cultivating the plant on ground he can never touch, but he'd own the right to profit from every medical product derived from it. Here's what you have to understand about intellectual property versus real property, Fern continued. You can lock down soil with an easement, but a formula lives in the mind, and minds can be taken from you if you don't file first. What do we do? I asked. Fern leaned forward. File the patent application before anyone else does. If you can't secure the IP, I can't protect your long game. The easement buys you time and territory, but it doesn't buy you ownership of what Iris discovered. A business card came out of the desk drawer and landed in front of me. Patent attorney Richmond. Pharmaceutical botany her specialty. Call her today, say Fern Alcott sent you. She'll want Iris's research notebooks, extraction protocols, chemical composition data, any preliminary efficacy work. I looked at Willa. Willa looked back at me. Between us, we had the greenhouses, Iris's notebooks, my medical training, and Willa's years at the plants. How much time do we have? Willa asked it. Fern Alcott's face gave nothing. I can't say when Reed cracks the IP angle, but a man who's spent 5 years pushing you toward a proxy has either already cracked it or he's right on the edge. File now. Don't sit on this. I rose. Willa was up with me. I said thank you. Fern handed over the folder. Your copy. Everything Iris signed, everything she put herself on the line to protect. Don't let it out of your hands. I took it carefully. One more thing Fern said. Before Iris passed, she told me something. She said Garrett will know what to do with the sage. No one else will. I didn't move for a moment. Then I looked at Willa. That afternoon, I said voice low, we begin the work your mother spent 20 years waiting for a person with medical training to finish. The drive back was wordless. Stepping into the greenhouse felt like crossing into another climate, warm, quiet green. Willa dragged out a metal chair without a word and set her mother's leather-bound notebook on the bench between us. Old thing, brown leather split at the spine page, edges gone yellow. Every line inside was Iris's hand. Dates, temperatures, chemical compositions, extraction yields. I turned to the first page. January 2021, years ago. She started before I was even born, Willa said softly. I nodded and kept reading. The opening entry, White Sage Salvia apiana. Initial cultivation attempt. North Carolina, red clay soil, pH 6.2. Transplant from California stock. Iris hadn't been tending a garden. She'd been running a program. We follow her extraction protocol exactly as written, I said. Willa walked to the corner of the greenhouse where Iris's copper distillation column stood on a wooden bench. That copper caught the light, polished every week for 3 years. I never let it go, Willa said. Couldn't explain it, just felt like something Mom would have wanted kept ready. From a box under the bench, she pulled a small chemical extraction kit. Standard gear, glass beakers, rubber tubing, alcohol, solvent, distilled water. I worked through Iris's protocol one line at a time. Harvest mature leaves from 3-year-old plants, dry at room temperature for 14 days, grind to fine powder. Alcohol extraction at precise temperature. Filter, distill. Dilute to specific concentration. How long does this run? Willa asked. Full protocol, 2 weeks minimum, I said. But there's a shortcut for right now. Your mother included a rapid extraction method for quick preliminary assessment. I found the page emergency extraction protocol used for immediate efficacy assessment. I need fresh leaves, I told Willa. 3 mature stalks. She moved to the white sage section without a pause. 3 stalks clipped clean and fast back to the bench. I crushed the leaves by hand. The smell hit hard, sharp, medicinal, nothing soft about it. Alcohol into the beaker leaves, in burner underneath. The liquid shifted to pale green. 10 minutes then, I strained it through cheesecloth. A thin greenish extract was what remained. What are you going to do with it? Willa asked. Test it. I pushed my left sleeve up past the elbow. The shrapnel scar tracked from shoulder to elbow, nerve damage underneath that had been throwing off a low grinding burn since the day I caught that wound. It never fully quit. I pressed the extract onto the skin along the injury line. Sharp heat first, then it receded. I ran the clock 20 minutes and ran an internal check the way I'd been trained. Pain reading down considerably. Not gone, but cut by half, maybe better. Anecdotal evidence at best, I said, keeping my voice level. Controlled extraction, documented procedure, reproducible results, that's what we need. What I kept to myself somewhere behind the ribs, something had come back that I'd written off. Hope. Most women use their final weeks settling debts and making peace. Iris had spent hers building something in the soil, counting on the day the right clinically trained person walked through the door. She'd been waiting for the right combat medic to come home. Dad Willa said, barely a sound. Does it work? I looked at her. Yes, it works. The breath that left her carried years in it like a held position, finally stood down. 20 years of logs, I said, turning pages. Precise extraction temperatures, dilution ratios, skin barrier, absorption rates, all of it charted. This was never a pastime for her. It was an unfinished clinical project waiting on a collaborator. Page after page, small refinements, failed batches recorded honestly beside the ones that worked. Iris had treated this the way a scientist treats field research, no shortcuts, no ego. The last entry stopped me. March 14th, 2 weeks before she died. The hand had trembled, but the words were still legible. Garrett, if you're reading this, trust the white sage, and trust Willa. She is more like you than she knows. I shut the cover. Outside North Carolina, snow was pressing against the glass, warm inside. The copper still had its shine. She knew Willa whispered. She saw everything and never broke. I nodded. Didn't try for words. We worked until dark, checking Iris's notes against each other, mapping the full extraction plan, working out what the patent application timeline would demand. At 7 o'clock, Willa's phone buzzed. She checked it. Color left her face. "It's Reed," she said. I set the notebook down. Speaker on. She answered. "Hello." "Willa, hey, it's your brother." Warmth flooded into that voice from nowhere. Manufactured warmth. The tone a man reaches for when he wants something and doesn't want you to know it yet. I heard Dad's back. Reed pressed on. "Why am I finding this out secondhand? I've been worried sick." "How's he doing?" Willa glanced at me. One nod. "Keep it going. He's resting," she said carefully. "It's been a lot." Of course, Reed said. "I just wanted to touch base on the farm. Want winter crops holding up. Anything need looking after?" "We're fine," Willa said. Reed let a beat drop. When he came back, his register had gone casual, the practiced ease of a man who'd prepared the question in advance. One thing, there are people in the North Carolina herb markets saying Copper Ridge has something in the works. Word's been going around the last few weeks. Anything I should know? My pulse dropped to something slow and even, combat calm. He already knew. He was measuring how we'd respond. Willa looked at me. One shake of my head. "End it. Just keeping up with Mom's gardens," Willa said. "And same as it's always been." Right, Reed said. "Well, marketing and distribution. You know I have contacts there. Offer stands whenever." "I'll keep that in mind," Willa said. "Can I speak with Dad?" Reed asked. I put out my hand. Willa passed me the phone. "Reed," I said. "Dad, God, it's good to hear your voice. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "I'm resting, Reed," I said. "When I'm ready to talk business, I'll make the call." I ended it. Willa held my gaze. "He has eyes on us, or he's bought someone who does," I said. Our window just got narrower. Understand what it means when your adversary calls to casually ask whether you're developing something? He's already got the answer. That call isn't intelligence work, it's pressure. "What do we do?" Willa asked. "We move faster," I said. "Finish the protocol, document every step, file before he does." I stared into the pitch-black North Carolina night beyond the glass. I'd run operations in sector knowing the enemy had our heat signatures, the entire discipline being to never let them see that we knew. This was the same sensation. Reed was watching. Fine. So was I. 3 days after that call, Dwight rang. His voice had settled an octave lower than usual. The register of a man who'd run a 72-hour stretch through ugly records and come out the other end carrying what he'd hoped not to find. "Secure video," he said. 10 minutes. Have Willa there." I got the laptop open on the kitchen table. Willa sat beside me. The screen resolved and Dwight Osterfeld's face appeared. He looked worn through. The specific exhaustion of someone who's been reading financial crime files until the numbers blur. "I've verified everything. No lead-in from Dwight, straight to it. Bank statements, forged signatures, the withdrawals. It all holds. Exactly what you brought me." I nodded. "Where do we go from here?" Dwight shared a document. Spreadsheet, columns of statutes and federal codes. Here's the full charge picture, state and federal. Wire fraud, 18 U.S.C. 1,343 electronic banking networks used to run a fraudulent scheme. Identity theft, 18 U.S. C. 1,028 signatures forged on legal banking instruments. Financial elder abuse under North Carolina. Statute 33 VSA 6902. He looked straight into the lens. "You have more than enough to open a federal investigation," he said. "I've already put a former contact inside Army CID Financial Crimes Division. On notice they have the file, and they're looking at it." Willa came forward in her chair. "How long are we talking?" "A solid federal package takes 3 to 6 months to build," right, Dwight said. "But what we have now is sufficient. The forged signatures stand on their own as prosecutable. The The wire fraud is clean, and the Army doesn't look kindly on anyone who steals from a soldier on deployment. Something rearranged itself inside me. Not relief colder than that, sharper. Tactical clarity. 5 years I'd worn the target. The mark. The soldier whose accounts got hollowed out while he pressed fingers into wounds 8,000 miles from home. That chapter was closing. I was now a federal prosecution witness. State and federal charges are not interchangeable. State prosecutors juggle budgets and backlogs. Federal prosecutors carry the United States Army behind them, and that institution has no tolerance for anyone who steals from a deployed soldier. One more thing, Dwight said. He pulled up a different screen, a corporate filing, filled at Delaware LLC registration. I read the header. Meridian Bioherb, LLC, filed July 2020, 6 months before I stepped off that Greyhound at Richmond Main Street Station. Dwight pointed to the officer section, Garrett Calhoun and Petra Langley. I worked through the rest. Business purpose herb extract commercialization, North Carolina region. Registered agent corporate services, Delaware. Initial capital, undisclosed. He built the corporate infrastructure to strip this farm before you ever landed on U.S. soil, Dwight said quietly. Willa's grip went white against the table edge. This wasn't opportunistic, I said. He drew up the plans. Every step deliberate, Dwight confirmed. He filed the LLC, drained your accounts, buried your letters before they reached Willa, cut her off, then waited for you to walk in so he could lean on you to sign away the property or the IP. My eyes stayed fixed on the screen. That business purpose line wouldn't release me. North Carolina herb extract commercialization. Reed had known about the white sage. He'd known what Iris spent years developing. He'd grasped its medical value. And while I still thought of this farm as nothing more than a return address, he was already building the apparatus to take it. There's one kind of thief who steals because a door swings open. Then there's what Reed did, filing a company 6 months early, pre-constructing the legal coffin for his father's legacy before the man was anywhere near the ground. How did he even learn about the sage? Willa asked. Dwight shook his head. Still working that, but he's been running this at least 6 months, probably longer. Those phone calls, I said. When he asked about North Carolina herb market rumors, that wasn't reconnaissance. He already had the intelligence. He was checking whether we'd caught up to what he knew. Textbook move, Dwight said. Signal the target they're being watched, never confirm it directly. I eased back. My mind had shifted into the same register it used at checkpoints. Timelines. Probabilities. Threat vectors. CID moves in 3 to 6 months, I said. What does he do with that window? Dwight's expression hardened. Reed sees it coming. He's been bleeding the clock with extension filings, but those top out. He's got maybe 6 months before the federal case lands, so he moves faster. He has to, I said. Dwight nodded. He can't take the farm outright. The conservation easement seals that route, but a patent on the white sage extract filed before you act gives him commercial licensing control. That's his play. Or, I said slowly, he opens a different front entirely. Dwight looked at me through the screen. Which front? I thought about the conservatorship petition. Fern had described the one Iris had neutralized with the trust structure and easement. The one that would have deposited the farm's management into Reed's hands if he could argue I was unfit to run it. Competency challenge, I said. He builds a case that I'm mentally incapacitated, petitions for guardianship or conservatorship, and controls my legal decisions, forces the signature. Willa's face drained. Can he actually do that? With the right evidence, I said. Medical records, documented incidents, willing testimony. Dwight went quiet then. Your VA file carries a PTSD disability rating. 70%, I confirmed. That's not proof of incompetence, Dwight said. Millions of veterans hold that rating and run their own lives. But it hands him a lever, I said. Something to pry at if he locates the right angle. Dwight nodded slowly. He strikes first, that's certain. The question is where he aims. I already knew before he finished. Reed would come for my credibility, my judgment, my fitness to be trusted with decisions. He'd reach for the wound I couldn't dress in public, the combat damage that tore me out of sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, pulse, driving hands hunting for a weapon that wasn't there. He'd use the PTSD. I had to be positioned ahead of that. The farm's first week gave my body something close to rest. The second week, the arrangement collapsed. 3 o'clock in the morning, buried deep in sleep when ice sheared off the roof. The impact 2 rooms over sounded all wrong, too heavy, too sudden. My body fired before my mind caught up. Off the mattress and moving, not waking, but reacting. Pure reflex from 100 forward positions. Out of the room, pressing down the hallway, reading shadows. Pulse at 140. The shrapnel near my spine ignited from the sudden violence of it. I went down on the floorboards. Dark, cold. A North Carolina farmhouse hallway at night. Not Mosul. No incoming, just ice. I ran the breathing protocol. You nose and mouth out. Combat medic rhythms stabilize your own vitals before you're any use to anyone else's. But the dark unlocked something I'd kept sealed. The day Iris died, I was in Mosul. The video link kept dropping. Satellite lag stretched every word until it arrived cold and remote. Reed had been on that screen, composed, unhurried. The hospital had called, he said. Mom was gone. He'd signed the releases while I was unreachable in a hot zone. For the first time, I asked the question I should have raised 3 years earlier. What releases? A door down the hall opened. Soft steps. Willa came out of the dark and found me there on my knees, hands flat on the floor, breathing hard. She looked at me, said nothing. No hollow comfort, no questions. She put her back to the drywall and sat beside me. 20 minutes in the dark, both of us. Then, do you want to head down to the greenhouse? The sage smells completely different at night. I cleared my throat. Yeah. First time I'd let anyone see I wasn't fully intact. We moved through the cold without talking. The spine pain was easing, movement sometimes did that. Inside, white sage reached us like something from another life. Earthy, sharp, medicinal. Willa dropped into the dirt between the rows. I sat beside her. She talked to me in those last months, Willa said quietly. About you. About what this place was supposed to become. I waited. She said you were the only one who could finish the work, Willa continued. The medical background, the discipline she believed you could complete, 20 years she never got to. The sage stood silvery green under the single overhead bulb. She wanted to tell you herself, Willa said, but she knew you'd cut your tour short trying to get home. She couldn't let you carry that while you were still deployed. Some wounds live in silence because speaking them gives them a different weight until someone settles beside you in the dark without a single question, and the quiet between you becomes the most truthful thing exchanged in years. We sat until gray light came through the glass, dawn arriving slow. Willa studied the toes of her boots. Dad, a beat. There's something you don't know. I turned toward her. 2 years ago, Reed came down with paperwork, she said. Called it a standard asset allocation waiver to close out Mom's probate. A formality, he said. Everyone had to sign. Something cold moved through my chest. I signed it, Willa said. I was 26, deepest depression I'd ever been through. He was my older brother. He knew the law, I didn't. She breathed. A month later, I found my copy and actually read it. Her eyes came to mine. A quitclaim deed. I had surrendered every ownership claim I held to this farm. I kept my voice level, clinical, the register you use when anger would shut the patient down. What did Reed say when you confronted him? Not to worry, Willa said. The deed only activated if the farm sold. We weren't selling. He said forget about it. I closed my eyes. You need to understand what a quitclaim deed is, not a contract with conditions. A surrender. The moment the ink dries, every right to the property is gone unconditionally. Immediately, no threshold, no trigger. Just gone. Willa, I said quietly, is that deed somewhere you can get to it? She nodded. Hidden in my desk. I was too ashamed to let anyone see it. This is not on you, I said. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red. He read your state of mind and used it against you, I said. That's not a mistake on your part. That's abuse. I got up slowly, my leg pushed back. I ignored it. We're going to see Fern today, I said. What I'm about to walk you through is the moment I finally understood the full shape of what had been done to me and how deep it went. Before we get there, I want to ask you something. If you discovered that someone close to you had been quietly working against you the whole time, would you confront them the moment you knew, or would you build your case in silence first? An hour later, Willa slid the deed out of her desk drawer and set it on the table. Photocopied dense with legal language, her signature running along the bottom line. I looked at it a long time. Reed had maneuvered his own sister into surrendering everything she had while she was on medication and had nowhere else to turn. A combat medic learns early that adrenaline is a liability in the field, but a combat medic also recognizes an encirclement when it's forming around him. Reed held the bank accounts. The forged signatures were his. Meridian Bio, Herb, LLC, was his. Through that quit-claim deed, he believed sole ownership of the farm was his too, and he had a 6-month runway before CID would close the gap. He intended to use that runway. The only open question was timing and which weapon he'd reach for that I still hadn't identified. Fern Alcott studied the deed copy without producing a single sound. I tracked 4 full rotations of the second hand around the wall clock before her eyes came back up. "This deed has a fatal defect," she said. Willa shifted forward in her chair. "What does that mean?" "North Carolina law mandates a specific acknowledgement form for any real property transfer," Fern explained. "The person signing has to affirm to a notary freely without duress, with genuine comprehension of what they're agreeing to. The acknowledgement attached to this deed borrowed a generic Virginia form that drops the language North Carolina actually requires. Layer that on top of your documented depression at the time of signing, and you have 2 separate grounds to void the thing: procedural defect and undue influence. A court can invalidate it." Something moved inside me when she said that. Not relief calculation. But Fern's voice went flat and harder. "Reed can walk into the county registry and record this whenever he feels like it. The moment that happens, clearing the title turns into a months-long legal war. Even if we win the challenge, the cloud on the title alone causes serious damage." She turned to her computer and brought up the North Carolina Land Records database, ran the search. "He hasn't filed it yet," she said. "That's our window." "How wide?" I asked. "No way to know," Fern said. "Could be tomorrow, could be 6 months out. The clock doesn't start until he records it." She looked at both of us. "Here's what we do today," she said. 2 filings, no waiting. First, a motion to void the deed in North Carolina Superior Court, grounding it in defective notarization and undue influence. Second, we push the patent application forward immediately, no more delays. Think of it in terms, a quitclaim deed with bad notarization is like a weapon that's been sabotaged. It looks functional right up until someone actually fires it in court, and then it disintegrates. What does it take to establish undue influence? I asked. Fern turned to Willa. Someone who was there, an independent witness who can speak to your mental state the day you put your name on that paper. Nobody with a financial interest in how this plays out. The color left Willa's face. "Oh, Dallas?" Fern gave a slow nod. "If she'll testify?" "She will," I said. Before 8 o'clock the next morning, I was walking to Odalis's place on my own. She had coffee ready and waiting, like she'd been expecting the sound of my footsteps on her porch boards. "Get in here," she said. We settled at her kitchen table. I asked her to take me back to the afternoon 2 years ago when Reed had pressured Willa into signing. Odalis didn't have to search her memory. "I had a clear line of sight from outside the greenhouse," she said. Willa was in tears. Reed was standing over that table the way a debt collector stands over someone who's run out of options. Whatever that was, it wasn't a brother coming to visit. It was something colder. "Why didn't you step in?" I asked her. "I thought it wasn't my place," she said, and her voice dropped. "That's been sitting on me ever since." "Would you put your name on an affidavit for the court?" I asked. "No hesitation whatsoever," Odalis said. I nodded and sat with that for a moment, then one more question. During the stretch when Iris was ill, I said, "How often did Reed show up?" Odalis let out a long breath. "Regularly. Each time he left, Iris would take herself out to the garden and stay there alone for hours. She told me once, that boy doesn't make the trip because he cares about me. He comes to take inventory of what's still here." Odalis rose, crossed the room to a drawer, and came back with a thick envelope. "Iris left this with me," she said. "Told me if Garrett ever has need of it, put it in his hands." The envelope was heavier than it had any right to be for what it looked like. I didn't tear it open there. I wasn't going to do that in Odalis's kitchen. I made the walk back through a thin fall of snow, with my fingers closed around it the whole way. That evening, Willa and I sat together at the kitchen table, one lamp burning between us, shoulders almost touching. I broke the seal on the envelope, a compact black USB drive and a folded note on Iris's personal stationery. "Garrett opened this with Willa. Willa plugged the drive into her old laptop. 3 files loaded up. I clicked the first one, audio. Iris's voice came into the room, thin but steady. This is Iris Catherine Calhoun, February 18th. I'm making this recording because there are things someone needs to know. A pause. Her breathing was audible. Reed has been here 3 times this past month, she went on. Every visit he pushes me to rewrite my will. His argument is logistical convenience for the family. He tells me Garrett cut off contact, that Garrett is overseas in some kind of institution and isn't capable of making decisions. Her voice broke on the next part. I don't believe it. Garrett doesn't leave his post. He never has. Willa pressed her hand over her mouth. The second file was a scanned handwritten letter, Iris's script made out to Fern Alcott. I am stating clearly and without qualification my intentions regarding the conservation easement on Copper Ridge Herb Farm. No party under any circumstances or justification may disturb that arrangement once I am gone. That land stays protected. Forever. The third file was audio. Again, Iris's voice reduced almost to nothing. Willa, sweetheart, I don't have much time left. Hold on to the farm. Keep your distance from your brother. Your father is coming back. Wait for him. Then silence. Some mothers throw themselves between their children and whatever is coming for them. Iris did something different. She constructed legal armor from her sickbed and made sure her son's own words would expose him long after she was no longer there to speak. Willa didn't move. She knew exactly what was happening, she murmured. She built everything we needed and banked on us eventually finding the door. I put my hand on her shoulder and kept it there. Nothing I could have said would have added to what Iris had already left behind. That night, first time in 5 years, I stretched out on my cot and felt her presence in the room. In the soil outside, in the dried herb stalks, and the fact that my daughter now slept without throwing the bolt on her door. But I knew the quiet had an expiration date. Reed still had his corporate shell. He still had Meridian BioHerb, LLC. He still had 6 months before CID cornered him. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind. Within 6 weeks, the fight would go public. 6 weeks passed. North Carolina held its cold, but it was a different cold now. Not the dead, sealed cold that lived outside Reed's door. This was the cold of ground that belonged to us. News moved through the county the way it does in places like this. Unhurried, deliberate by word of mouth, at the farmer's market in church basements, over coffee at the general store. O'Dallas mentioned something to a neighbor at the co-op. That neighbor passed it to the feed supplier. The feed supplier got talking with a reporter from the Boone Valley Agricultural Digest over beers. 3 weeks into March, my phone rang. Mr. Calhoun, my name is Bev Dunlap. I cover agricultural innovation for the Boone Valley Agricultural Digest. I'm hoping you'd be willing to speak with me about what you're doing out at Copper Ridge. My first instinct was to end the call. 23 years of keeping my head down. Attention is exposure. Exposure turns a quiet operation into a public spectacle. But Willa was right there in the kitchen when it rang. She read my expression. Who is it? I muffled the receiver. Reporter, Boone Valley Agricultural Digest. Dad, don't hang up. Willa said, no hesitation. I held her gaze. Tell me what thieves hate most, she said. Sunlight, the whole county knowing what we've built here, that's not a liability, that's a shield. I thought about that for 1 beat. Then I brought the phone back up. Ms. Dunlap, I said 30 minutes, botanical science only, nothing about our personal history or family situation. Fair enough, she said. Bev Dunlap showed up 2 days later, practical boots and notebook somewhere in her 40s. The type of reporter who leads with a real question and then actually waits for the answer. We took her through the greenhouse from one end to the other. Willa walked her through the cultivation approach Iris had developed over years. I covered the extraction protocols. We laid out the white sage rows, the copper distillations setup, the chemical composition logs. Bev moved her pen steadily across the page. What are you actually trying to accomplish here? She asked. Big picture. Build a pain management compound that genuinely works, I told her. File the patent, license it through a pharmaceutical partner, produce something that does right by people and doesn't strip the land bare in the process. You believe that's achievable? She asked. We have preliminary efficacy data already in hand, Willa said. The patent application is underway. Bev glanced between us. This is a real story. Can I get a photo? No faces, I said. Understood. Here's what I know about transparency as a tactical instrument. Once the community at large understands what you've built, stealing it without anyone noticing becomes a near impossible task. Criminal enterprise runs on darkness. A published article is a lamp left burning in every window. The piece went live 3 days after her visit. Combat medic and daughter convert North Carolina herb farm into pain research laboratory. Clean grounded all science. No mention of Reed, no mention of the legal fight, just a father and daughter carrying forward what the mother had left unfinished. Within 24 hours, the piece had been shared 600 times across local North Carolina networks. Within 48 hours, an email landed in our inbox from R. Espinoza, Partnership Development, Atlantic Pharma, subject Copper Ridge Herb Farm, potential collaboration. Mr. Calhoun, I read the piece with great interest. I'm a former Army medic myself, 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry Kandahar, 2008 to 2009. Your name caught my attention, so I pulled your service record. We ran overlapping theaters. I work now in partnership development for Atlantic Pharma, a mid-sized pharmaceutical company focused on plant-based therapeutics. We'd like to explore a potential licensing partnership around your white sage research. Are you available for a call this week? Respectfully, Ruben Espinoza. I read it twice. Willa read it over my shoulder. Is this real? She asked. I think so, I said. I was drafting a reply when my phone rang. Dwight, I picked up. What happened? Reed just booked a flight. Dwight said no, lead in. Boston to Asheville. He lands Saturday. Something cold moved through my chest and settled there. How do you know? I asked. I've had his travel pattern under surveillance since we opened the CID file, Dwight said. Credit card alerts. He has no idea I'm watching. He booked it 2 hours ago. 2 hours after the Atlantic Pharma email. I said mostly to myself. What Atlantic Pharma email? Dwight asked. I forwarded it to him. A stretch of silence, then the sound of keys. He read the article, Dwight said, and he understands exactly what it signals. A pharmaceutical partnership makes that IP worth exponentially more. If you lock in a licensing deal before he can establish his own patent claim, he loses everything. Every tactical decision cuts in both directions. The same floodlight that draws in allies also tells your enemies the target is worth fighting over. What's his move? I asked. Unknown. Dwight said, but he's not flying to North Carolina to shake your hand. I looked over at Willa. She was reading the Atlantic Pharma email again, face drained of color. How much time? I asked. Saturday, Dwight said. 3 days. I hung up. Willa met my eyes. The press visibility had run both directions. Yeah, I said. We'd brought in a pharmaceutical partner, but we'd also told Reed that something worth taking was happening at Copper Ridge. And now he was on his way. I opened the laptop at the kitchen table and typed a reply to Ruben Espinoza. Mr. Espinoza, Thursday afternoon, works 2 o'clock. G. Calhoun. Then I called Fern. We need to move faster on everything, I said. Reed's headed to North Carolina in 3 days. I'll get the filings ready, Fern said. But Garrett, if he shows up at the farm, don't engage him without a witness present. Are we clear? We're clear, I said. But I also understood something she didn't need to say. The public confrontation I'd been expecting for weeks. It wasn't 6 weeks out anymore. It was 72 hours. The Atlantic Pharma negotiation happened across a laptop balanced on the kitchen table. I wore the cleanest flannel shirt I had. Willa placed a jar of fresh white sage just behind the camera. 2 weeks had gone by since the article ran. 2 weeks since Reed had booked that flight. Ruben Espinoza appeared on screen first, then introduced Dr. Owen Halleck, Atlantic Pharma's lead corporate partnership representative. Late 50s, silver-haired. The look of a pharmaceutical executive who had reviewed thousands of compound proposals and could spot commercial potential on first read. Fern joined from her office on a separate line. Mr. Calhoun, Dr. Halleck said, we've gone through your preliminary extraction data. We're prepared to offer a letter of intent for Phase 1 clinical licensing. He shared his screen. Dense legal language filled the document, but the figure at the top was unmistakable. $500,000. This is an advancement, Dr. Halleck continued. Contingent on successful patent filing and Phase 1 efficacy trials, we become co-applicant on the U.S. PTO submission, which qualifies us for Track 1 accelerated review. Fern's voice cut through immediately. I need a clause added. IP ownership stays entirely with Copper Ridge LLC regardless of any future changes to real estate title. Dr. Halleck paused. That's an unusual stipulation. It's not negotiable, Fern said. Dr. Halleck looked off camera for a moment, then back. Accepted. We'll add the language. Under the table, Willa's hand found mine. One firm squeeze. Some victories don't arrive with noise. They come as a few words buried in a corporate contract, the kind that can't be clawed back no matter what someone does to the deed above it. What's the timeline? I asked. I got up from the chair, crossed to the window, and looked out at the white sage rose in the fading afternoon light. What's the pacer access fee these days? Dwight asked. 10 cents a page, $3 max per document. Just needed to plant my feet in something concrete, I said. Some part of my mind required mundane logistics to function. Filing fees, access charges, the kind of bureaucratic friction that keeps you from dwelling on the fact that your own son just moved to have you declared legally incompetent. Fern needs to be on this call, Dwight said. Hold on. Keys clicking. A dial tone, then Fern's voice. Garrett, I've already pulled the petition from court records, she said. Her tone was measured, methodical. I'm looking at it right now. I could hear her keyboard in the background. Fast, precise. North Carolina General Statute 35. A, she said. Conservatorship demands clear and convincing evidence of incapacity. That's a high threshold. Read attached your VA disability rating, 70%, PTSD, and an affidavit alleging erratic behavior, violent outbursts, and an inability to make sound financial decisions. I heard footsteps from upstairs, Willa moving around in her room, the old floorboards giving her away. She had no idea her brother had just filed paperwork, declaring her father incompetent and accused her of manipulating him. What's our response window? I asked. 30 days, Fern said. North Carolina law requires a formal objection with supporting documentation. The hearing is June 3rd. We have until June 2nd to get our counter evidence submitted. I looked at the calendar tacked to the wall. May 14th. 20 days to construct a complete defense against my own son's bid to seize control of my life. What kind of counter evidence? I asked. Fern's voice sharpened into focus. Independent psychiatric evaluation, medical records demonstrating cognitive function, financial records that reflect sound decision-making, witness testimony about how you operate day to day. We need to show the court you're fully capable of managing your own affairs. Can we win? I asked. Fern didn't pause. Yes, but we move right now. I'll file the formal objection first thing tomorrow morning. Garrett, you need an independent psychiatric evaluation from a North Carolina licensed provider. Someone who can get on the stand and tell that court you are fully competent to direct your own affairs and decisions. Do you know anyone who could do that? Fern asked. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out my wallet, opened it. Tucked behind my military ID was a business card I'd been carrying for 5 years. Dr. Ashby, North Carolina licensed psychiatrist, former VA consultant. She had evaluated me in 2016 when I was preparing to separate from active duty. A 3-hour clinical assessment, cognitive testing, full trauma history review. She'd confirmed the PTSD, the 70% disability rating was accurate, but 0 cognitive impairment, 0 functional limitations, full capacity for independent living, and every kind of decision-making that mattered. She'd cleared me across the board. I'd kept the card, because somewhere in a part of me that didn't argue about it, I'd known the day might come when I'd need documented proof that I wasn't broken, that PTSD didn't equal incompetence, that surviving the things I'd survived didn't mean I'd forfeited the right to run my own life. Dr. Ashby, I said. North Carolina licensed psychiatrist. She evaluated me in 2016 for VA purposes, cleared me completely. I have her contact information. Fern's keyboard accelerated. Perfect. Can you reach her this week? I'll call tonight, I said. Good, Fern said. I'll file the formal objection tomorrow morning. We'll attach Dr. Ashby's evaluation once it's done. North Carolina law gives us 30 days to respond. We're still inside the window, Dwight's voice came back in. Garrett, one more thing. Reed's affidavit claims you've had multiple violent outbursts since returning to North Carolina. Any truth to that? Oh, je plebo osvizan de Wilkis. No, I said. Witnesses who can speak to your stability, Dwight asked. Odalis Kettner, Willa. Fern's seen me twice in person. Bev Dunlap interviewed me for the piece. Every single interaction calm, controlled. Good, Dwight said. Log everything going forward, every conversation, every decision, every moment that demonstrates clear thinking. Reed's constructing a narrative that you're unstable. We need to build the counter-narrative, and we need it backed by evidence. Understood, I said. The call ended. I settled at the kitchen table, Dr. Ashby's card in my hand. The edges were bent, the corners soft from 5 years against my wallet, but the number was still readable. I dialed, 3 rings. A woman answered. Dr. Ashby's office? This is Garrett Calhoun, I said. Oh, former patient, I need to schedule an independent psychiatric evaluation for legal purposes. A pause on the line. I'm sorry, Mr. Calhoun, the woman said quietly. Dr. Ashby's practice closed last month. She's recovering from a stroke. The intake form on the waiting room clipboard asked me to rate my anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. I would have written, documented, managed, weaponized by my son. Fern had located Dr. Lorene Ashby within 12 hours of my call about the unavailable Dr. Ashby. No relation. An entirely different person. Female psychiatrist, North Carolina, licensed with a practice focused on trauma and competency evaluations. She'd agreed to an expedited assessment. 1 week after Dwight's call about the conservatorship petition, I sat in an Asheville clinic waiting room under humming fluorescent lights. Dr. Lorene Ashby came to the doorway. 50s gray hair drawn back, composed the kind of clinician who'd assessed thousands of veterans and could recognize combat trauma on sight. Mr. Calhoun, she said, come in. The evaluation room was small, pale blue walls. A desk, 2 chairs, a window, looking out over downtown Asheville. She sat across from me, clipboard resting on her knee. This will take approximately 3 hours, she said. Cognitive assessments, trauma histories, review, functional capacity evaluation. The aim is to determine whether you're legally competent to manage your own affairs and property decisions. Do you understand? I understand, I said. She moved through the assessment methodically. Memory tests, problem-solving questions about how I function daily, how decisions got made, how I handled stress, whether I dealt with intrusive thoughts, hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation. I answered every question straight. Yes, I had PTSD 70% disability rating from the VA. Yes, nightmares still came occasionally. Yes, certain sounds could trigger combat reflexes. But no cognitive impairment, no executive function deficits, no breakdown in my ability to manage complex decisions. 3 hours later, Dr. Ashby set down her pen. Mr. Calhoun, she said, your PTSD is documented and well managed. 0 cognitive impairment. 0 executive function deficits. You are fully capable of managing your own affairs, making sound financial decisions, and living independently. She held my gaze for a moment. The highest marker of cognitive health isn't the absence of trauma, she said. It's recognizing manipulation and refusing to let it provoke a reaction. I looked at her. I haven't reacted once since I came back, I said. She nodded. I can see that. As I stood to leave, she placed the signed evaluation letter in a sealed envelope and handed it to me. PTSD doesn't make you weak, she said. It's evidence you survived. Don't let someone in a suit use it to draw the boundary lines of your life. I drove back to Copper Ridge in my truck, Highway 421, late sun driving through the windshield. I sat in the cab with Dr. Ashby's signed letter in my hand. And for the first time since stepping off the bus at Richmond Main Street Station 6 months ago, I felt the weight shift not gone, just something I could finally measure. My phone buzzed. Text from Dwight. CID investigation officially open. Wire fraud, elder exploitation angles active. Hold the line. I shut my eyes and let the air out slowly. The Army was moving. 3 weeks passed. Fern filed Dr. Ashby's evaluation with North Carolina Probate Court. The conservatorship hearing was set for June 3rd. We had documentation, we had witnesses, we had a psychiatric evaluation that stated without qualification that I was competent. Then, on a Tuesday evening in early June, a car came up the Copper Ridge driveway. I was in the kitchen. I heard the engine and looked out. Petra's sedan, alone, no Reed. She got out and walked to the door and knocked. I opened it. Garrett, she said quietly. Can I come in? I moved aside. She walked to the kitchen table and sat. She set her keys on the surface with both hands. Deliberate, controlled the way someone does when they've decided to burn a bridge and want to be certain the match is lit. "Reed doesn't know I'm here," she said. I sat across from her. "Why are you here?" She drew a breath. "Reed's firm is dead, $2.1 million in debt. He's in a kind of desperation I can't navigate anymore." I waited. "The conservatorship petition," she went on, "the Meridian Bioherb LLC, the quitclaim deed he made Willa sign. I didn't understand the full scope of it until recently. I told myself he was trying to hold the family together, but that isn't what this is. He's trying to save himself." She looked at me directly. "Are you here to bargain, or did you bring me something useful?" I asked. Petra's jaw went tight. "What I came to say is this: somebody will be contacting Agent Prewitt at Army CID very soon. Someone holding corporate records, financial documents, internal correspondence." She got to her feet. "Reed has no idea I'm here," she said again, "and it has to stay that way." She moved to the door and stopped. "For whatever it's worth," she said, "I'm sorry. I should have seen it long before now." Then she walked out. I stood there until her taillights dissolved into the dark at the end of the drive. Then I dialed Dwight. "Petra just left," I said. "Came alone. Says somebody's about to make contact with Agent Prewitt at CID, someone with the financial paper." Dwight held the line a moment. "She's flipping." "That's my Reed," I said. "Don't go near her," Dwight said. "CID needs to run this clean. She goes to them on her own, she's a cooperating witness. You reach out first, that's witness tampering." "Understood," I said. "I'll flag my CID contact to expect something incoming," Dwight said. "Garrett, this matters. If Petra's got the financial records, she can back up everything we've put together." I set the phone down and stood at the kitchen window, eyes on the white sage rose going gray in the fading light. 3 days on, Dwight forwarded an email from redacted at cid.army.mil, subject interview request. Mrs. Petra Langley, Agent Prewitt, Army CID. Mrs. Petra Langley has requested a voluntary interview re-financial transactions, May 2020, to present scheduling this week. Under the forwarded message, Dwight had typed one word: dominoes. Agent Prewitt's screen share came up, and I was looking at a contract header I'd never laid eyes on. Letter of intent, Viridia Global Biotech, and Reed Calhoun Pharmaceutical Solutions. "Gentlemen," Agent Suzette Prewitt said, over the secure video line, her voice holding the unhurried precision of someone who'd assembled federal prosecutions from raw evidence start to finish. "A compliance flag inside Viridia's legal department put this document in front of us 3 days ago." Dwight leaned in at Fern's conference table, his accountant's instincts already running the numbers. I sat rigid, both palms flat on the wood, watching the screen. "May 15th, 2023, Prewitt continued. Reed Calhoun, acting as sole representative of Reed Calhoun Pharmaceutical Solutions, executed this letter of intent with Viridia Global Biotech. Purchase price $4.2 million for exclusive licensing rights to medicinal compounds derived from white sage cultivated on Copper Ridge Herb Farm, Addison County, North Carolina." She let it sit. The floor felt unsteady. Reed had sold my mother's medicine. Land he had no claim to research. He hadn't done a plant he had no legal right to offer. "Wire fraud." Dwight said it quietly. 18 U.S.C. 1343. Aggravated. Prewitt confirmed. Mr. Calhoun submitted fraudulent paperwork to Viridia, representing himself as beneficial owner of both the intellectual property and the real property beneath it. On April 22nd, he received a wire transfer of $850,000 as a good faith deposit. I thought of my mother's notebooks, 15 years of careful observation, field trials, extraction protocols in her precise hand. Reed had taken her life's work, wrapped it up, and moved it to a biotech firm while she was dying. Viridia's due diligence team cross-referenced North Carolina land records last week and caught the discrepancy, Prewitt said. The conservation easement surfaced alongside Iris Calhoun's estate documents, which named Garrett and Willa as sole beneficiaries. They called our office the same day. "What's their exposure?" Fern asked. "Minimal. They acted in good faith, kept all documentation intact, and self-reported. We've told them their cooperation will be recognized." Then Prewitt's face shifted into something harder. "Mr. Calhoun, however, is facing federal wire fraud charges, aggravated identity theft, for forging state documents and potential RICO predicates, given the financial pattern Mr. Osterfeld has built. How do you absorb the moment your son's guilt stops being probable and becomes undeniable, not suspected, not inferred, undeniable? $850,000 moved on false pretenses, forged papers underneath it, stolen land beneath that, and research that was never his. We need him on record, Prewitt said, specifically making additional false ownership claims while wearing a wire. North Carolina State Police will handle the operational setup. Dwight's fingers moved across his tablet. You want Garrett to bring him out to the farm? Exactly. A reconciliation meeting, Garrett opening the door, willing to discuss the property situation and the White Sage research. We script every word, nothing that hands anyone an entrapment argument. An open door. What he does when he walks through it is his own doing. I thought about Reed in this office 3 weeks back, using my PTSD as a weapon, calling me unfit. The conservatorship petition in a judge's chambers, making the case I was too far gone to run my own life. He'll show up, I said. He's certain I'm broken. Prewitt looked at me steadily. In my experience, Mr. Calhoun, men like your son run from a fixed set of assumptions. They decide vulnerability is a permanent state. They can't read resilience when it's right across the table. Fern cleared her throat. Timeline. We're targeting this Saturday, 4 days out. Enough time to wire the property coordinate with Deputy Sheriff Yarbrough and walk Garrett through what we need from him and what needs to stay off the table. I'll draft the email, Dwight said. Keep it simple. Garrett wants to talk before the CID investigation goes any further. Hint that a workable arrangement might still exist. The words tasted like ash. I nodded anyway. He'll read it as capitulation. Good, Prewitt said. Let him. Dwight sent it at 3:47 p.m. From my account, Fern copied for the legal record. Subject line, farm visit Saturday discussion. 8 sentences language tuned to signal exhaustion, and a man reaching for some kind of peace. Reed's reply landed in 43 minutes. Saturday, 10 a.m. works. I'll bring Petra. This is the right decision, Dad. We can fix this together. I read it 3 times. The presumption packed into every line, the certainty I'd folded that breezy fix this together, as though we were 2 men sorting out a shared inconvenience, rather than a father watching his son walk toward federal custody. Dwight's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, then at me. Prewitt confirms deployment. Saturday, 9 o'clock, the property wired. Deputy Yarbrough staged in the barn with 2 CID agents. Backup recorder on you in case of equipment failure. My phone went next. 2 texts from Dwight logged for the record. CID deploy confirmed. Saturday, 9 o'clock. He has no idea what's coming. I sat in Fern's office while afternoon light slanted low through the windows. Phone in hand, my son's words about fixing things still on the screen. Somewhere in Richmond, Reed was probably already rehearsing his posture, the talking points, the gracious concessions he'd offer his damaged father. He had no idea the net was set, and he'd stepped into the center of it the moment he hit reply. The first North Carolina morning. I drew breath without running. A threat assessment came on a Saturday in July, sunlight falling clean across Copper Ridge's front porch. No perimeter check, no exit scan, just coffee in my hand. Willa beside me in one of my mother's old wooden chairs, and red clay warming in the open air. The wire crew had cleared out at dawn, 3 hours spent threading microphones through the processing shed and barn. Agent Prewitt had kept her voice level through the final briefing. Let him talk, Mr. Calhoun. Men like your son cannot leave silence alone. Odalis Kettner's truck came up the drive at 9:30, earlier than expected. She stepped out carrying a canvas bag that smelled of pastry and cinnamon. Thought you might want something to eat before your company gets here, she said, setting it on the porch table between Willa and me. Iris always said the hardest conversations sit easier when your stomach isn't empty. Willa pulled out a scone still warm. Did she really go out into a blizzard the night she lost the variance? Odalis's face moved through something, grief edged with a kind of pride. February 2006. 48 hours without sleep, documenting the first sage bloom. All 6 variants in the greenhouse common garden. Sage pineapple, sage Russian, tricolor, white sage in the far corner, the one every expert had written off as too tender for North Carolina winters. She glanced toward the rose plants standing waist-high in the morning light. Climate control failed at 2 a.m. By first light, 5 of the 6 were gone. Only the white sage came through. What did she do? I asked. Odalis smiled. Ran outside in tears. 20 minutes later, she was back covered in snow laughing. Said, losing the others just told her which one was built to survive. I looked out across the land. The earth felt different than it had when I'd arrived 2 months ago. Each morning, Willa moved through the rows, fingers reading stems. The way my mother's hands once did, texture, moisture, every pass, a quiet assessment. The conservation easement meant this ground could never be sold, subdivided, converted into anything other than what it was, a working herb farm, growing medicine tied to this soil and nowhere else. That's when I understood what an easement like that really means. Succession. Not inheritance. Succession. My mother had been building something meant to outlast all of us, and Willa was the one who'd carry it. At 10:45, gravel crunched under tires. Reed's black SUV led the way, dust churning in its wake. Behind it, a dark blue sedan rolled in Virginia plates, moving slow and deliberate. Both vehicles pulled up near the processing shed and cut their engines. Odalis stood at the porch railing without a word, one hand resting light on the wood. Willa hadn't moved from her chair, but something in the way she held herself went rigid. Reed climbed out looking like a brochure-pressed khakis polo shirt, the kind of clothing that runs a week of my groceries on a single tag. The passenger side opened, and out stepped a man pushing his mid-40s navy suit, leather briefcase, the quiet arrogance of someone whose time gets billed in 15-minute increments. "Dad?" Reed's voice came across the yard, dressed up in warmth it didn't feel. "Good of you to agree to this." I kept my mouth shut and my coffee close. The suit walked toward me, like the property had already changed hands. "Garrett Calhoun, Alton, Featherstone, and Grady in Richmond. My client is your son. 46, 47. At most, silver salted through dark hair. Fingernails trimmed to the kind of precision that's never been tested by a wrench or a fence post. He broadcast corporate litigation from every detail. The watch. The Italian shoes gathering a coat of red clay. The smile that stopped well short of his eyes. He snapped open his briefcase on the outdoor table and laid out 2 packets, each clamped in blue backing sheets. "No time for preamble, Mr. Calhoun. Copies, the originals, are already sitting in the appropriate courts." He pressed a finger to the first. "Petition for conservatorship, documented mental health concerns, PTSD-related instability. VA records and prior psych evaluations underpin the filing." He moved to the second. "Demand letter. Immediate transfer of all patent rights, intellectual property, and derivative research tied to medicinal compounds developed on this property over to Pierce Family Holdings, LLC." Reed was planted behind Featherstone, both hands buried in his pockets, watching me with the flat patience of a man who expects to win. "Refuse to sign today," Featherstone pressed on. "Probate court, long road, public record. Nobody benefits from that kind of scrutiny, Mr. Calhoun. Quiet resolution is available to you. Alternatively, this gets expensive and ugly on all sides." Willa's fingers curled around the armrest, her knuckles draining of color. I looked down at those packets and left them exactly where they were. "Dad," Reed said, voice dropping low, almost tender. "There's no reason this has to get hard." Petra was still in the SUV. Through the windshield, I could see her fixed on the dashboard, both hands in her lap, composed and still. She was the one who'd asked to sit down with Agent Prewitt. Voluntarily, Dwight had sent me the email confirmation 3 days back. Across the yard, her eyes caught mine for less than a second. That was enough. She'd already given them everything. Featherstone produced a pen from his inside pocket. "Both documents need your signature before I leave this property, Mr. Calhoun. There's a straightforward path here." Then the processing shed door swung open. Fern Alcott came out into the light with a leather folder under her arm. Gray hair in the same tidy bun she brought to every meeting. She moved across the yard at the pace of someone who has never once needed to hurry because she already knew the outcome. "Good morning, Mr. Featherstone." The calm in her voice was the kind you only earn after watching every intimidation play in the book get run at least twice. "Fern Alcott, counsel for Mr. Calhoun. You can put those away." Featherstone's smile pulled tight at the seam. "Ms. Alcott, I had no indication Garrett had engaged an attorney. You do now." The gravel spoke again, a deeper register. this time the sound of something official rolling in under its own authority. A county sheriff's SUV nosed into the driveway, white body green decals light bar riding the roof. It rolled to a stop directly behind Reed's sedan and boxed it in. Reed rotated toward it, and for the first time since he'd stepped out of his vehicle, his hands came free of his pockets. I set my coffee on the railing, fixed my eyes on Alton Featherstone, and used my voice for the first time that morning. "Before this goes any further," I said, "someone here needs a word with your client." The sheriff's doors swung open together. Agent Suzette Prewitt came out first, then Deputy Sheriff Yarbrough, then a second CID agent with a document case. Fern put the master folder in my hands. I moved to the outdoor table where Featherstone's conservatorship filing still lay, opened the folder, and set the first page face up on top of it, spine angled toward the attorney. Conservation easement. Copper Ridge, Herb Farm, perpetual. Featherstone's gaze pulled down to it. I set the next page alongside. Motion to void. Quitclaim deed invalid notarization under North Carolina statute. Jurisdiction accepted by the court last week. Reed's weight shifted. "Dad, what is—" I placed the third and fourth documents together on the table. Atlantic Pharma, letter of intent, $500,000. Research partnership, IP ownership, confirmed in the names of Garrett and Willa Calhoun. I tapped the fourth. Patent filings. White sage medicinal compound extraction, filed April 30th, 2023. Inventor Iris Catherine Calhoun. Successors Garrett and Willa Calhoun. Featherstone was working through the pages now, and what had been a confident complexion was going gray. I added the fifth. Psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Lorene Ashby, May 22nd. Finding zero cognitive impairment, full legal capacity. What came after that silence was the sound of an entire legal offensive caving in on itself. "This restructures the situation completely," Featherstone said, his voice stripped of its earlier ease. "Mr. Calhoun, I was operating on information that was not accurate." "You were fed lies," Fern said, level and quiet. "By the man you represent." Agent Prewitt advanced with a blue-backed document held out in front of her. "Reed Alexander Calhoun." Her voice moved across that yard like it carried its own weight class. "You are served with a federal subpoena under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1343 wire fraud, and Section 1028 aggravated identity theft." She placed it in Reed's hands. He held it at arm's length as though the paper itself were hot. "Fraudulent representation to Viridia Global Biotech concerning ownership of intellectual property and real property at this address. Wire transfer of $850,000 taken under false pretenses. Additionally, 47 forged signatures on corporate filings transmitted via interstate wire." Reed's hands moved at last. He gripped the subpoena. His eyes never left me. "Dad," I looked at my son, 32 years old. Standing on the ground, his grandmother's hands had worked cradling federal charges with a decade's weight behind them. Reed's face coming undone in front of me was not a victory. It was what a combat medic knows, in his gut, when the wound turns out to be self-inflicted. You note it, you record it, and you understand there are limits to what you can repair. "I've kept men breathing in open ditches with nothing but my hands," I said, "but there's no saving a man bent on gutting his own people." Petra had stepped out of the SUV. She walked right past Reed like he was furniture crossed to where Fern was standing. "Ms. Alcott," she said quietly, "my voluntary testimony with Agent Prewitt is scheduled for Tuesday. Does that still stand?" Fern confirmed it with a nod. 9 a.m., Federal Building, Asheville. "Thank you." Reed turned his head toward her. "Petra, no," she said, voice stripped flat. "I told you 6 months ago? Stop. You chose not to." Agent Prewitt indicated the vehicle parked behind the sheriff's SUV. "Mr. Calhoun, formal processing requires your presence. Grand jury appearance within 14 days per the subpoena." I caught Prewitt's eye before he could move. 2 minutes, 50 feet at the gate, just the two of us. She held the thought, then gave a short nod. 2 minutes. I started toward the gate, cane in hand. Reed came behind me after a beat, those expensive shoes dragging across the clay. We stopped at the line where gravel gave way to county road, close enough that I could read the creases at the corners of his eyes, the places where my mother's face had found its way into his. "You have no idea what I was dealing with," he said. The market pressure, the investors, that debt. I cut off limbs while mortar rounds took out the windows above me, I said. I know what pressure looks like. What I cannot make sense of is why you turned on your own family instead of picking up the phone. His jaw went through the motion. Nothing came. I wanted the hatred to arrive, the clean, scorching kind that seals what it destroys. But what I actually felt was my mother's weight, the kind she must have carried on every visit, every unanswered letter, hoping her son had turned a corner and quietly bracing for the answer. She wrote you letters, I said. 23 of them. You bounced them back with false return addresses, so I'd conclude she was the one who walked away. That's what cuts the cord, Reed. I'm sorry. You might be. And maybe somewhere down the road, 6 months, 6 years, that sorrow actually reshapes something in you. I looked back at the farmhouse. Willa was on the porch watching. The door stays open for a man who decides to be someone different, but he walks in with nothing, no credit, no history, because the son I thought existed turned out to be a story, I told myself. Reed's mouth opened, then closed. He turned and moved toward the sedan without another word. No backward glance when he got in. None when the car eased out and down the county road, trailing a ribbon of dust that floated in the July heat. I stayed at the gate until the engine sound thinned to nothing. No victory in it, no relief, only the particular flatness that settles after surgery, that saves the life and loses the limb. When I made my way back up the gravel to the house, Willa had 2 cups of tea on the porch, steam rising off them in slow, thin threads. Fern is staying for lunch, she said. O'Dallas is bringing sandwiches. I settled into the wooden chair my mother used to favor. Willa pressed a cup of tea into my hands, and we sat without speaking for a good while. Any word from Petra yet? She asked at last. I shook my head. She'll testify, Willa said low and certain. And when she does, the whole fraud structure comes apart, every shell company, every forged document, every wire transfer. I drank my tea-tasting chamomile, and something else Willa had started growing near the eastern fence. Then we wait. 3 months after the subpoena, Fern Alcott's voice came through the phone with the flat precision of a surgeon placing the final stitch. Federal docket just updated, she said. We have verdicts. I was standing in Copper Ridge's kitchen morning light, cutting across the counter where I'd been going over Atlantic Pharma's latest research protocols. Through the window I could see Willa in the processing shed, her silhouette moving between the extraction equipment we'd put in 6 weeks back. Go ahead, I said. Reed Alexander Calhoun guilty plea accepted on 2 counts wire fraud under 18 U.S. C. 1343. Aggravated identity theft under 18 U.S. C. 1028. Sentencing 4 years. Federal prison consecutive terms. Restitution ordered in full $240,000 plus. Accrued interest structured payment plan over 10 years post-release. Assets frozen pending satisfaction of judgment. I put down my coffee. Said nothing. Fern kept reading off what sounded like official documentation. Petra Marie Langley Cooperation Agreement accepted by the prosecution. 3 years supervised probation, no incarceration. Restitution obligations shared under a structured settlement on a separate payment schedule. Her testimony provided the evidentiary foundation for 17 additional fraud counts across shell companies we hadn't even known were there. Viridia. The letter of intent declared legally void. Viridia's good faith deposit the $850,000 seized under federal asset forfeiture and directed toward restitution. Viridia had pulled out of all negotiations and put out a statement categorizing the entire episode as third-party fraud. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down. Autumn sun pressed warm through the glass, but my hands were cold. Conservatorship petition dismissed with prejudice. Dr. Lorene Ashby's evaluation entered into permanent record. No future filing challenging mental competency would be entertained by North Carolina probate court without extraordinary new evidence. She paused. I heard papers shifting. White Sage Medicinal Compound Patent U, SPTO. Track 1 approval granted August 28th, exactly 4 months from the filing date. Patent number UNs 2023/XXXXXXX. Inventors listed Iris Catherine Calhoun, deceased, and successors Garrett James Calhoun and Willa Lynn Calhoun. Atlantic Pharma listed as co-applicant with exclusive licensing rights per the partnership agreement. Copper Ridge, LLC, holds ironclad intellectual property protection across all derivative compounds and extraction methodologies. Fern worked through the verdicts the way a quartermaster reads supply inventory after a siege methodical complete and stripped of any trace of triumph, because this was never about winning. It was about coming through in one piece. Conservation easement, she finished, remains untouched and perpetual. The land cannot be sold, subdivided, or developed locked. For agricultural and conservation purposes, no end date. I sat quietly for a moment, listening to Willa moving equipment in the processing shed. The far-off call of crows out in the eastern field. "Fern," I said finally, "thank you. You built a defensive wall faster than any civilian client I've ever had," she said. "Most people facing a conservatorship threat the size of that one would have folded at the first volley." "Standard triage," I said. "Stop the bleeding, clear the airway, lock the perimeter." Well, every front of that perimeter is locked now. We talked logistics for another 10 minutes, tracking the restitution payments, federal monitoring of Reed's case, Atlantic Pharma's preliminary Phase 1 clinical results. After we hung up, I stayed at the kitchen table a long time and watched dust drift through the October light. The white envelope showed up 4 days later. Federal Detention Center, Boston. Reed's cursive on the front, that same elegant script my mother used to say, had too much flourish and not enough substance. I opened it at the kitchen counter. 2 pages lined paper black ink. The first half read like a corporate postmortem. Market pressures, debt cascades, investor demands, competitive dynamics. I had no choice but to explore alternative asset structures. He wrote about stealing from his own father and forging his grandmother's estate documents as though it were a strategic pivot rather than felony fraud. I nearly quit reading there, nearly folded it closed and dropped it in the trash. But the second half was different. "Dad, I know you wired that money on blind trust. I know you believed in me when there wasn't one good reason to. We'd barely spoken in 20 years, and you still sent everything you had because I asked. I have no excuse, only this ugly truth. I got so used to things being handed to me that I stopped knowing how to be grateful. I forgot that trust is earned, not passed down like a deed. That failure isn't yours to carry." I read that paragraph twice, set the letter down, picked it up again. "I don't expect forgiveness," the letter went on. "I don't expect a reply, a visit, or any acknowledgement at all. But I need you to know I understand what I dismantled, not just the money, not just the legal disaster. I destroyed the idea that your son was someone worth believing in. I can't repair that from here. Maybe I never can. But I'm going to work at becoming someone different from the man who showed up on that farm thinking he could pressure a combat medic into signing away his mother's legacy. The name at the bottom was just his first name. No flourish this time." I stood at the counter a long while, letter in hand, watching Willa through the window. She was working through soil samples, hands moving with the same deliberate patience my mother used to have. I had spent 23 years learning to extend something like forgiveness to men for what combat had done to them. Shattered minds, ruined bodies. Men who came home hauling ghosts they'd never signed up to carry. I'd learned to hold space for trauma, for rage, for every way war quietly unmakes a person. But Reed had never been in combat. He had manufactured his own war and drafted me as a casualty. I didn't burn the letter, didn't tear it up, didn't carry it to the porch or read it again in better light or frame it as any kind of landmark. I opened the deep drawer in the kitchen, the one where things go that don't need settling today. Old photographs, my mother's recipe cards, my discharge papers, the small iron box that had held her returned letters. I folded Reed's letter in half and set it inside, then eased the drawer shut. Some wounds only heal enough to stop losing blood. Sometimes that has to be sufficient. That evening, Willa found me on the front porch watching the white sage catch the last of the day's light. She'd seen the federal detention postmark when the envelope arrived. She didn't ask about the letter. She just took the chair beside me and said, "Atlantic Pharma sent over draft partnership terms. Phase 2, clinical trials kick off spring 2024. They want us both on the research team." I nodded slowly, watching the way the late sun moved across those silver-green leaves my mother had spent 15 years learning to grow. "Then we build," I said. Dwight Osterfeld stepped out of the rental sedan in the November chill and took in Copper Ridge the way he used to take in every forward operating base. I ran methodical measuring, whether the perimeter would hold. 5 years had passed since we'd been in the same physical space. Phone calls, video conferences, encrypted document exchanges throughout the federal case. But this was the first time he'd seen the farm actually running, and I watched his forensic accountant's mind catalog the infrastructure the same way it used to catalog fraud trails. "You put all this together in 6 months?" he asked, his eyes going to the processing shed, where extraction equipment hummed behind insulated walls. "Willa built it," I said. "I just hold the perimeter." We walked the grounds. The white sage spread east toward the tree line, silver-green in the thin winter sun. The greenhouse addition was finished double, the growing capacity my mother had maintained with climate controls that could support year-round cycles. Willa had put in raised beds from Iris's archive schematics, the ones we'd pulled from the third filing cabinet labeled Future Expansion 2012. "Atlantic Pharma field crew comes out twice a month," Dwight asked. "Phase 1 extraction runs," I said. "Willa's running 3 secondary product lines out of Iris's research files. Topical compounds, tincture bases, concentrated oils. Atlantic holds first rights on pharmaceutical applications. We kept agricultural and wellness product licensing." Dwight stopped at the eastern fence and turned to look back at the farmhouse. Odalis Kettner's truck sat near the barn. She'd come on to help with harvest logistics, coordinating with local co-ops for distribution of the non-sage herbs. "Your mother would recognize this place," Dwight said quietly. "Not because it looks the same, because it's doing what she built it to do." We ended up on the front porch with coffee, watching Willa work through the greenhouse glass. She was checking soil composition notebook open on the bench, comparing pH readings against something in Iris's original cultivation logs. "In Fallujah," Dwight said, eyes fixed somewhere past the fence line. "You said something I filed away as concussion talking. You'd just pulled 3 casualties out of a vehicle that shouldn't have had survivors. You were sitting against a concrete barrier, both hands covered in blood." He asked what I planned to do when I got home. I remembered that conversation, the grit of dust on my teeth, the smoke taste in the back of my throat, my ears still screaming from the IED. "You said," Dwight went on, "the final theater I want to win is the one I choose myself." I wrote it off as combat fatigue at the time, and yet, I watched Willa measure white powder from a glass container, her notes written in the same precise hand my mother used to have. "I don't know if this is winning," I said. "I just know we didn't surrender the ground." Dwight laughed short, sharp, the sound of a man who recognized something true. "When you're an old soldier," he said, "those two amount to the same thing." Dwight had spent 2 decades sifting through financial wreckage, hidden assets, corporate fraud, good operations, gutted by men who swung ledgers like weapons. But watching me on a North Carolina herb farm must have felt like encountering the only set of books that ever actually balanced every loss, recorded every asset, defended nothing left to hemorrhage. When he left an hour later, I walked down to the cultivation rows where Willa was clearing the eastern line for next month's Phase 2 sampling. The ground was cold but not yet frozen red, Virginia clay still giving under my boots. I knelt beside her and began pulling dried stems from the buffer zone between active rows. My hands knew this kind of work, methodical, repetitive, purposeful. The shrapnel was still sitting against bone in my left shoulder, still sent sharp reminders every time the temperature fell. My legs still hitched when weather fronts pushed through the old Kandahar break that had never healed quite level. But I was standing on terrain I'd selected beside the person I'd chosen to protect. That settled the ledger in ways no federal restitution figure ever could. "The eastern rows are ready for Phase 2 sampling next month," Willa said, brushing soil from her gloves. Then she got to her feet and reached into her jacket pocket. "Come to the greenhouse a minute. There's something I want to show you." Inside, she handed me a manila envelope. University of North Carolina, return address, official seal on the flap. I opened it with care and read it through twice. "PhD program," I said. "Plant biology partial residency option, allowing continued operational presence at Copper Ridge Herb Farm." Willa was studying my face with an expression I couldn't fully read, hope and fear sitting in equal measure on a blade's edge. "I put in the application 4 months ago." She said it quietly. "I didn't tell you because I was terrified of getting rejected and letting you down." Professor Hollis had been consulting on the Atlantic Pharma extraction protocols and had asked whether Willa had ever considered formal research credentials. "The partial residency track keeps me here, keeps the farm running with coursework 2 days a week in Asheville. My hands still trembled sometimes when gravel moved under tires, still reached for weapons that had been gone for years when shadows crossed the porch at the wrong angle. But those were just scars, and scars meant the cut had been survived. Your mother, I said, folding the letter with care, would have come apart with joy, the kind where she'd ring everyone she knew and have O'Dallas bake a cake the size of a truck. Willa's shoulders dropped half an inch relief, showing up in posture the way my mother used to carry it. She told me once, Willa said, her voice measured, that I inherited your tactical spine. You know what she said you were best at? I shook my head. I figured holding baseline under incoming fire, something along those lines. Willa's eyes were bright, carrying something that looked like my mother's particular brand of fierce pride. She said you were best at refusing to abandon a soldier who'd earned the right to stay in the line, that you'd hold ground for people who proved they could stand it even when command called retreat. I didn't trust my voice right then. I just pulled Willa into a hug that probably ran longer than either of us had expected. When she turned back toward the workbench, I stood in the greenhouse doorway, watching her move into autumn light, surrounded by white sage that caught the low sun like silver fire. For half a second, I saw Iris's exact silhouette reflected in our daughter's shoulders, the way she worked through the rows, as though memorizing each plant by touch, deliberate and reverent. Not a painful ghost. An unbroken line of defense running straight through time. 1 year exactly since McLean and I took my morning inventory the way I'd been trained. Begin with what hasn't moved, then account for what has. The porch boards were frozen underfoot. December cold had settled over Copper Ridge the way it had on the morning I'd first limped up this gravel with $60 and a worn-out ID. The white sage stretched east under pre-dawn gray. What remained unshifted shrapnel still wedged near my spine, right leg, still catching in the cold, the Kandahar break that never healed straight. PTs, SD nights that occasionally slipped past my guard and left me awake at 3 a.m. cataloging exits. What had shifted Willa was navigating doctoral coursework while running 3 cultivation lines. Copper Ridge, LLC, was producing steady revenue through the Atlantic Pharma Partnership, not wealth, but operational sustainability. The greenhouses had taken on 2 part-time farmhands, local kids learning extraction protocols. I knew exactly what perimeter I was holding. Not running, not just surviving. Building. 1 year ago, Richmond Main Street Station platform, $60 in my pocket, rejection in McLean Midnight Greyhound North because there was nowhere else to go. Now, ground my mother had worked a daughter who had waited 5 years for a father who'd forgotten how to come home. Before heading out to check the greenhouse heat valves, I opened the nightstand drawer. 3 things rested inside, arranged with deliberate spacing. Reed's jailhouse envelope still sealed, the follow-up letter he'd sent 6 weeks after the first. The ink existed. The boy was alive. Time was moving. That was sufficient inventory for now. Iris's black USB drive-holding voice recordings. I still wasn't strong enough to play more than once a month. Her digital echo preserved. Someday I'd be able to listen without my hands shaking. Someday wasn't today, and that was acceptable. Anne wrapped in canvas a single dried white sage seed pod. Willa's note was tucked underneath. Dad, this seed is from the very first stock Mom planted, the one that survived when all the others died. Carry it if you want. The 3 things in that drawer weren't keepsakes. They were a triage kit for living unanswered grief that could hold digital memory to return to, from a position of strength, future life small enough to carry and patient enough to root. I slipped the canvas bundle into my breast pocket and closed the drawer without a sound. What I was carrying now wasn't the weight of trauma. It was raw material that understood how to grow. When I came back out onto the porch, Willa was already there, 2 mugs steaming in the cold air. She passed one over without a word, coffee strong enough to stand in for a defensive position. We sat shoulder to shoulder on the wooden bench my mother used to favor, watching snow begin to fall, fat flakes drifting down to cover the fields in the particular silence of 2 people who have moved past the need to fill quiet with words. The snow held a different quality now. It had none of the biting loneliness of that first McLean terminal morning when the cold had felt like an accusation. Do you have any regrets about the deployment years, Dad? Willa asked, her voice quiet. I took a pull of coffee and felt the seed pod pressing through canvas and jacket against my chest. Yeah, I said. I regret believing electronic transfers were the only way to deliver love from a distance. I regret thinking that wiring money home was enough to constitute being a father. That showing up could be reduced to routing numbers and account deposits. Willa was quiet for a moment, watching snow settle over the eastern cultivation rows. Mom told me once, she said, smiling at something only she could see, that love isn't an asset you can route through a wire transfer number. She said the only currency that carries any weight is the kind you deliver in person, dirt under your nails, and time you'll never reclaim. What was love, if not exactly this? Two people watching snowfall over defended ground, steam, lifting from mugs, no words required, because the silence itself was fluent. Because we'd both arrived at the understanding that presence is the only tender that holds its value once everything else is stripped away. I laughed then, not the bitter pressure release I'd trained into myself in field hospitals, not the short tactical sound I'd used for 23 years. This was the first unconstrained, unguarded laugh that had made it out of my chest since my boots first touched civilian ground. Your mother, I said, was a brilliant commander. We sat there as dawn broke cold and clean over Copper Ridge, watching white flakes settle onto red clay. The seed pod rested against my heart. The greenhouses hummed at our backs, and somewhere beneath the frost, my mother's legacy was rooted in soil that would outlast every one of us. I thought about the iron box and its 23 returned letters, the fake phone number, the forged signatures and federal charges that had carved a sun-shaped absence into my life, the kind that probably never fills completely. I thought about Fern's voice reading out verdicts, Petra walking away from Reed's SUV, Agent Prewitt, serving subpoenas on defended ground, Dwight recalling words I'd spoken in Fallujah that turned out to be the mission statement I'd been carrying the whole time. Blood made us peers by accident chromosomes and birth certificates, the genetic lottery that tied me to Reed and Iris and Willa through mechanisms I'd never selected. But that cold December night 1 year ago, limping up this gravel path with $60 and a bad leg and no other destination, I chose this. I chose her. I chose the land and the fight and the hard, messy work of showing up, when showing up was the most demanding tactical maneuver I'd ever had to execute. And it turned out that was the only kind of love that doesn't have a wire transfer number. I sipped my coffee and felt the white sage seed pod press against my chest through the canvas Iris's first planting carried forward. Somewhere in federal detention, Reed's letter sat waiting on a reply that might never come. Somewhere in North Carolina, soil roots were working their way down that wouldn't surface for years. All of it honest. All of it exactly the perimeter I'd chosen to hold. For 23 years, I made a mistake that nearly cost me everything. I told myself I could love my family from a distance by sending money home. I convinced myself that financial support and showing up were the same thing. They are not. Presence cannot be wired electronically. The people who matter need you in the dirt alongside them, heart in the work. Here is what I came to understand. Revenge against family betrayal isn't about leveling the person who wronged you. It's about refusing to let their betrayal level what matters. When Reed stole from me, I could have answered in kind. Instead, I chose to defend the ground my mother had spent her life protecting. I believed that trial existed to teach me the difference between blood and belonging. Real family shows up. Real revenge is building something solid, while the people who hurt you sit inside the consequences they chose for themselves. Chosen love runs deeper than broken blood. That is what I carried out of that year, not bitterness, not a wound I kept returning to, but a seed pod in my breast pocket and a daughter on the bench beside me and ground beneath our feet that no one could take. One final note: while this draws from real experiences, certain details have been adjusted for storytelling and privacy. Any resemblance to specific individuals is coincidental. What I hope stays with you is the lesson. That's where this story lands, not with a shout, with two people sitting on a cold porch watching snow come down, over ground that could never be taken again. I spent a long time asking myself how it came to this. A son I believed in, a daughter I'd lost contact with for years, a farm I nearly signed away because I trusted the wrong person. What it cost me was time I can't recover, and a relationship that may never fully heal. What it taught me is that silence and distance are not the same as peace, and that the people who love you will still be standing in the cold, waiting even after years of not hearing your voice. I believe God allowed this particular trial to reach me something no deployment ever could, that showing up in person with nothing but your presence is the only thing that cannot be forged or wired or stolen. If these father stories mean anything to you, let them mean this. First money sent home is not the same as being home. Don't confuse a wire transfer for a relationship. Second, when someone moves to isolate you from the people who love you, that is not a family dispute, that is an operation. Treat it like one. Third, the best version of a dad's revenge is not destruction. It is building something so solid and so well defended that there is nothing left to take. Fourth, if the ground is worth protecting, protect it before the threat arrives, not after. If this story reached you, leave a thought in the comments. I read them. Share it with someone who is carrying a quiet wound from a family betrayal. Sometimes just knowing someone else found their way through is enough. And if you haven't already subscribed to His Hidden Revenge, there are more stories here that earn their telling. Thank you for giving this your time. I mean that. Take care of yourselves out there.